Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis will begin Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph, 8 lines from the bottom. We learned previously that if the Kohen Gadol had a mum, that he was not able to do the avodah on Yom Kippur, and they replaced him with the substitute. So if this occurred before the Talmud Shel Shachar, then the Kohen, that the substitute that now replaced him, he had his inauguration, his initiation, his chinuch. He could have that with the Talmud Shel Shachar. But if it occurred after the Talmud Shel Shachar, so the question was, how are we going to initiate the substitute Kohen Gadol to do the avodah? A Kohen, to do the avodah, the Kohen Gadol needs chinuch. How are we mechanech him prior to doing the avodah of Yom Kippur? Because after the Talmud Shel Shachar, the avodah has to be done with the Kohen Gadol, the avodah of Yom Kippur. So where does he get his chinuch? So one teretz that we gave previously was by the avnei. Since the avnei of the Kohen Gadol is different than the avnei of the Kohen Hedyot, the fact that he's wearing that avnei and doing the avodah of Yom Kippur, that itself will inaugurate him, give him the chinuch. Frak the Gemara, Hani Chalaman Amar, avnei shel Kohen Gadol, avnei shel Kohen Hedyot. That teretz is fine and good if you say that the avnei of the Kohen Gadol is the same as the avnei of the Kohen Hedyot, meaning the avnei of the Kohen Gadol is during the year round is the same as the avnei of a Kohen Hedyot, and therefore the avnei that he wears on Yom Kippur is different. So therefore there's a clear difference. Now we know that the avnei, the Torah says clearly, the avnei of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is pure linen. The avnei that he wears during the rest of the year is linen and wool, is Shabbos. Now it's not clear what the avnei of the Kohen Hedyot is. If the Kohen Hedyot, his avnei during the year is the same as Yom Kippur during the year, there's no difference. If the avnei of the Kohen Hedyot is Shabbos, then the avnei of the Kohen Gadol in Yom Kippur is different than the avnei of the Kohen Hedyot. So there is a clear now distinction, and you can say that the avnei is what's machanech the Kohen Gadol in Yom Kippur. But Alaman Damar Kohen Gadol Avnei Ela Alaman Damar Avnei Shel Kohen Gadol Loize Avnei Shel Kohen Hedyot. But if you say that no, the avnei of the Kohen Gadol that he wore all year round is not the same as the Kohen Hedyot, meaning that the Kohen Hedyot's avnei was pure linen. Therefore, the avnei on Yom Kippur of the Kohen Gadol and the avnei of the Kohen Hedyot on Yom Kippur would be the same. So there's nothing to differentiate between the two. Michael, Maiman, Omar Abai says, Levish Meinam Hapach B'Tzinara. So he says that therefore there has to be some other way to inaugurate the Kohen Gadol. He wears his Shmeina Begadim on Yom Kippur, the 8 Begadim of the Kohen Gadol, and he turns over the avorim of the meat that's supposed to be burnt on the Mizbeach. He turns it with a fork, he turns it over on the Mizbeach to burn it. That is considered to be enough of a avodah that will give him the chinuch, to inaugurate him before he does the avodah of Yom Kippur. Okay, Rav Huna. And like Rav Huna says, Amar Rav Huna, Zar shahapach b'tzinora chayiv misa. A zar that with a fork turns over the avorim on the Mizbeach, he's chayiv misa. That has to be done by a kohen. So you see, it's considered to be enough in the category of avodah that a zar is chayiv misa. Therefore, it's enough to say that if the Kohen Gadol wears the Shemayna Begadim, and he does that, that is the chinuch that he gets, that inaugurates him to do the avodah, and he can do the avodah in Yom Kippur. Rav Papa Amar gives a different teretz. He says, you don't need anything additional to the avodah of Yom Kippur. Since the avodah on Yom Kippur can only be done by a Kohen Gadol, so if he does the avodah, that avodah with his Begadim, then he's doing the proper avodah, which can only be done by the Kohen Gadol. That in itself is a chinuch. The avodah itself is machanachim. Miloi Tanya, didn't we learn in the Brisa, Kol HaKelim She'asa Moshe Meshechasa Mekachtan. It's that all the kelim that Moshe Rabbeinu made, that he made for the Mikdash, the Meshicha, anointing it with oil, that was gave him the Kiddush. That inaugurated them for the use. But after that, when the Mashiach, the oil was not used for that use anymore, what inaugurated it? it was the avodah itself, using it for the avodah that was given the chinuch. Here also, the avodah using the avodah, Kohen Gadol, doing the avodah, that gives him the chinuch. Ki also Rav Dimi Omar, he says, so we were discussing about the avnei. What was it made of? He said, avnei shel Kohen Hedget. He said, as far as the avnei, the belt of the Kohen Hedget, Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon, Chad Amar shel Kilayim. One said that it was made of Kilayim, Chad Amar shel Butz, and the other one said it was made out of pure linen. Tistayim the Rebbe hu Amar shel Kilayim. It's mistaber to say that Rebbe is the Tana that holds that the avnei of the Kohen Hedget was Kilayim. Why is that? The sign we learn in the Brisa in Ben Kohen Gadol Kohen Hedget El Avnei. There's no difference between the clothing of the Kohen Gadol and the Kohen Hedget. The only difference is the avnei. Divrei Rebbe. That's what Rebbe says. And Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon Aimer, Af Loi Avnei. He said even the avnei was not any difference between them. So Amos, what time of the year are we referring to? If you say we're referring to not Yom Kippur but the rest of the year, what do you mean? There's a huge difference. Kohen Gadol Neshamash B'Shmeina, the Hedget Barba. What do you mean there's no difference between them? The Kohen Gadol has 8 items of clothing, and the Hedget Barba only has 4. So what do you mean there's no difference? Elo must be Elah B'Yom Kippur. It must be that it's referring to Yom Kippur. And on Yom Kippur, Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon says there's no difference, meaning that we know that the avnei of the Kohen Gadol was linen, so it must be that he holds the avnei of the Kohen Hedget is also linen. And Rebbe is saying that there is a difference, and the difference is the avnei. It must be that he holds that the avnei of the Kohen Hedget is Kilayim. Where it says Amri Loi. Really, I'll tell you, it's not talking about Yom Kippur. It's talking about Yeshari Masechet. And the rest of the year, the avnei of the Kohen Gadol was Kilayim. So what does it mean that there's no difference? It means on the 4 clothing that they had in common with each other. It's not referring to the additional clothing of the Kohen Gadol. So Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon is saying that on these 4 clothing, the 4 items of clothing that they have in common, there's no difference between them. That they were both of Shabbos. And on there, then on Shai Masechet, that's when Rebbe says there is a difference, because opposite, he holds therefore that, we know that Shai Masechet, the Kohen Gadol's avnei was Kilayim, and he held that the Kohen Hedget avnei was only linen. So therefore, you don't have a raya from here. But Ki also Ravin Omar, we have a raya from the following, exactly who says what. So he said, Avnei shel Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim. He says, Avnei Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur Devra Kol shel Butz. Everyone agrees that it's linen. B'Shai Masechet, the rest of the year, Devra Kol shel Kilayim. Everyone agrees that it's Kilayim. The machlokes is a Kohen Hedget's avnei ben b'Shai Masechet ben b'Yom Kippur, whether it's the rest of the year or Yom Kippur. Rabbi Aimer shel Kilayim. Rabbi says that it's Kilayim. Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon Aimer shel Butz, and he says shel Butz. So you see, beferish, who says what? That Rabbi says shel Kilayim. Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon says it's linen. The Taisus Shanim asks, what does it mean in this lotion? The Kohen Hedget does not do the Avodah on Yom Kippur. So what does it mean that his avnei on Yom Kippur? So he gives following a few examples of where the Kohen Hedget could do some of the Avodah that required the Big Day Kahuna. He puts the Shnei Gzirei and Mala Ma'arocha, that can be done by Kohen Hedget. It can be Mahapech B'Tzinoira, to turn over the Yavarim on the Mizbeach with a fork, and the Trumas Hadesha. So all these things over here, we say that the Kohen Hedget, there's no difference in Yom Kippur and the rest of the year. Then in all of these cases, his avnei is the same. Amar of Nachbar Yitzchak, Afanami Tanina, we also learned the following, like was mentioned before. what Rebbe holds. We learn it from the following as well. It says al b'sarim. So it says in the pasuk regarding the Trumas Hadeshin, the pasuk says v'lo kain midoy vad u'mechnasei vad yilbash al b'sarai v'hermes Hadeshin. So it says al b'sarai. Now, why does it have to say that he wears it on his head? Mal tamad laim. It says v'lo kain. Already says v'lo kain, and it says yilbash, and it says yilbash. He wears a yilbash al b'sarai. So it says already the lovash. Why does it have to say mal tam loimer yilbash? So that's lahavi mitznaves va'avnei la Ramos Hadeshin. This wants this extra levisha, this extra connotation of levisha, is to include that the Trumas Hadeshin has to be done by all four clothing. You might think that it's not a complete avodah and you don't need all four clothing because the pasuk only says midoi bad u'mechnasei bad. So I might think it only needs the two. So it says no, an extra. It says yilbash, an extra connotation of wearing to include all the four clothing. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Daisai says lahavi big day kain gadol b'Yom Kippurim shein ksherim l'kain hedin. He says no. What it means to say over here is to be marbe that the big day kain gadol Yom Kippur, that after the kain gadol does the avodah on Yom Kippur, the pasuk says v'inichu sham. V'inichim sham, that he leaves them there. So you might, Rabbi Doisa says, you might say that means that they cannot be used at all. They have to be buried. So Kamashallah, no, it actually make the Gzera Shava of Yilbash, and we make it to the Gzera Shava to Yom Kippur. It says about Yilbash, that he wears it. We make the Gzera Shava of Levisha to teach you that these clothing of the Kohen Gadol could be worn by the Kohen Hedget. He does the Trumas Hadeshin, he could use these clothing. It's to teach you that the begodim that the Kohen Gadol used on Yom Kippur could be used by the Kohen Hedget the rest of the year. Now, by saying that, therefore, that shows you, it demonstrates that they were the same articles of clothing. That must mean, well, we know that the avnei of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur was linen. That must mean that the avnei of the Kohen Hedget was also boots, was linen. But Rebbe says, state shuv v'dor. He says, no, there's two kashas. Chada davnei shel Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim, because that lo yiseu avnei shel Kohen Hedget. First of all, he said it's not the same avnei. He argues. He says that the avnei on Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur was linen, and the avnei of the Kohen Hedget is shadnez. In the second taina, that is begadim sheishtamish behem kedusha chamura. You had the begadim that were used for kedusha chamura for Yom Kippur. Then the shtamish behem kala can use them for something of lesser kedusha of the avoid of the Kohen Hedget during the year. So therefore, that's not the liquid. So what is this extra levisha for that it's mentioned? Why does it say an extra levisha? It's to teach you that the Kohen, that Yilbash, he wears his clothing in any event, even if they are not in perfect condition, even if they're worn out, as long as they're not torn, but even if they're worn out, he can still wear them. Yilbash. And they follow the reasons the Sanya would learn in the Bryce V'inichim Sham. It says that they should be left over there. This teaches us that V'inichim Sham, that after the Kohen Gadol does the Avodah Yom Kippur, the clothes cannot be used; they have to be buried. The tunik niza, they have to be concealed; they can't be used at all. Rabbi Taisvaimer, no, Shalosh Tamish Bam Yom Kippur Ma'acher. All it means is that it can't be used for another Yom Kippur. But Rav Deisel Tamei, who holds, but it could be used by a Kohen Hedget for the rest of the year. Ton Rabbanon, if a Kohen Gadol becomes disqualified and then they have to appoint a substitute, Ton Rabbanon Irabay Psul Uminachet Hatav. There's a Psul, Kohen Gadol, they appointed another Kohen to be a substitute for him. Rishain Chayzer Lavadosim. When the first Kohen Gadol, when he recovers and he becomes qualified to do the avodah, he returns to the avodah. And Sheni Kol Mitzvah Kohen Gadol. And the second one, he's not the active Kohen Gadol, but he has the mitzvahs of the Kohen Gadol. The mitzvah Kohen Gadol that he has, he can't let his hair grow, tear his clothing, and contact Tuma, come into contact with Tuma, if he has one of his krivim died, he has to be, as opposed to a Kohen Hedjed, he cannot observe any Avelos, he cannot marry an Almona, he has to marry a B'sula, and when he does any Avodah, he does it with the 8 articles of clothing. That's what Divrei Rameir says. But Rav Yosi says no. He argues. He says Rishon Chayzer Lavaydasa. The first one, when he recovers and becomes fit, he returns the Avodah. But Sheni Ein Roy Loy L'Kohen Gadol Loy L'Kohen Hedjed. But the second one cannot do the Avodah at all, not even as a Kohen Hedjed. Amar Rav Yosi says, Ma'aseh b'Yosef ben Ilam b'tzik Pirish here by Psul b'Kohen Gadol minu tachtov, that there was a Psul and the Kohen Gadol, they appointed him to be the substitute, and then the Kohen Gadol, he recovered V'Amru Chachamim Rishon Chayzer Lavaydasa. The first one now goes back to being the Kohen Gadol to do the avodah of the Kohen Gadol. Sheni Ein Roy Loy L'Kohen Gadol V'Loy L'Kohen Hedjed. But the second one can't do the avodah at all. Kohen Gadol Mishum. He can't serve as a Kohen Gadol. He can't have the Shemayna Begodim and act as a Kohen Gadol because it might cause any kind of sinna or jealousy or hatred between. You have a Kohen Gadol, now you have somebody who is acting as a Kohen Gadol as well. And Kohen Hedjed Mishum Mal Mekadesh Le'Meridim. But the Kohen Hedjed is, he cannot go down and be demoted to be a Kohen Hedjed, because Mal Mekadesh Le'Meridim. You only elevate in Kodesh, you don't go down in level. So once he's appointed as a Kohen Gadol, he cannot become a Kohen Hedjed. He says that is the halacha, that he cannot go down and do the avodah, not as a Kohen Gadol, not as a Kohen Hedjed. However, Rav Yosef's maida, that if he did do the avodah, that the avodah is ksher, it's kosher. We have these reasons why he shouldn't, but he's fundamentally, he has been appointed as a Kohen Gadol, so the avodah is kosher. But, however, Rashi points out, that's if he does the avodah with the Shemayna Begodim. If he does the avodah with the 4 begodim, he's considered mechusar begodim, and there the avodah is psula, because he's fundamentally a Kohen Gadol. We don't let him do the avodah for the reasons of Eva and Mal Mekadesh Ve'Meridim, but essentially he is a Kohen Gadol. He was appointed as a Kohen Gadol, so if he does the avodah, even b'di'evet, it must be done with the Shemayna Begodim.